Well, welcome to Interfaith Awareness Week. I'm Sandy Hart. I'm the founder of SARA, the Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope. And it's timely to also mention that I'm on the Women's Task Force for the Parliament of the World's Religions and the producer of the Women's Village, co-producer of the Women's Village. And Sushila Mertens, who you see here, is as a part of our team there too. So if you're coming to the Parliament, look for us. I will be the blur on roller skates, but grab me if you can. You know this to be true, don't you, Abigail? You've seen me in a Parliament before. It's my party. Anyway, one of the topics that is very near and dear to my heart and is a fire burning in me, it's burning in my womb, is this urgency of reaction and response to what's going on in the world, because of the critical concerns that are hitting us at every sector, whether it's climate disasters. I mean, look what's happening in Maui today, what's happening in the climate. I mean, I don't think I need to tell you, but our climate, fire, drought, flooding, earthquakes, you name it, wage gap disparities globally, women's rights just being pulled back, centuries or decades at least, and children going to bed hungry, food insecurity, and food deserts. I know we each hold pieces of this in our heart, and so nobody is immune from what's going on in the world. But I've always taken the position personally, and I can only speak from my personal experience here, and also through the lens of Sarah, which I'll introduce you to in a moment, that it's our responsibility and our privilege. So I very rarely say those two words. I say responsibility without adding privilege, because we have a privilege. We are all here on this planet for a reason, and it's not to deplete. And yet the privilege is to be able to do something about it. And we do something about it through the gifts that were given to each and every one of us. None of us have the exact same gifts. So I want to have that conversation about responsibility and privilege, and through the lens of women, but we're not only women here too. So I absolutely want to hear, because it's really the divine feminine aspects that are obviously evident in men and women, or they're not gender specific, no matter how you identify, I should say. And so the idea that we tap into that divine feminine, and I feel like she's coming with or without us. So I want to be her midwife. So hello, Vanessa, welcome. You want to say hi? All right. Okay, we got audio. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure we could hear you. Hi. I'm just going to say real quick that this is a conversation, and we're talking about women and our responsibility and privileges to the critical issues on the planet today. And also one more element that I really want us to think about and think differently about when we look at a problem is asking a different question too. So we'll talk about that. And also, what does it mean to alchemize the problem? So I hope we can, I think we'll be able to really gracefully, in the time that we have together, come to some new understanding of our personal responsibility and privilege and what's going on in the world right now, and what a blessing it is. And that's an odd thing to hear. That's a hard thing sometimes to say in the face of all the suffering. But what a blessing this is, because we don't know where we're going, but we know we're on our way. So how are we going to be midwives to that place? And that's what all of the destruction and all of the disasters on the planet are telling us. We'd better change our ways now. because it's not going to work for where we're going. And I don't want to poison the water hole when I get there. So, or for my grandchildren or great grandchildren, which I feel very strongly about. But I want to tell you about Sarah first, because I'm here representing Sarah. I know a few of you know about Sarah. Sarah's a women's interfaith organization that started the morning of 9/11. And then a couple months later in my living room, first in my heart, then in my living room, and then in the community, largely in Orange County, California, and we became community builders. We have a creed, speaking of responsibility, we have a creed that says that we are women of our community dedicated to creating a more safe and harmonious environment with our daily actions. So there's that responsibility. It's how we show up in the world. We would show up first by attending festivals and events. We were invited to, with a table, and we did all kinds of different fun, interactive things. We were first on the scene if there were a disaster or a senseless crime against one faith or another. We were on the steps of gurdwaras or churches, or the AME church or a synagogue with candles and prayers and song. So we could mobilize, spontaneously. We were invited to panel discussions, and at UC Irvine and all the different universities. We did a lot of work with different universities on difficult dialogue initiatives, and have been written into the Ford Foundation's Difficult Dialogue initiative, and Harvard's and the Women's Interfaith Movement post 9/11 initiative, because they were the Pluralism Project at Harvard was exploring this new wave of feminism. Was unique. We weren't pumping the pavement and or pounding the pavement and pumping our fists, and it wasn't an adversary energy. What we are doing now is we are appealing to our higher and our deeper value systems. We're calling people into circle. We're calling women into leadership. We're showing up not to do anything but to say, all right, children, we're going to talk. And that was the position that we've always taken. And yet I know that's happening around the world. The Alberts and I have a friend, Betsy Wiggins, in Syracuse, that while I was waking up the morning of 9/11, she too, in Syracuse, on the other side of the country, we didn't know each other. We met at Harvard at this exploratory conference when we were written into this report. That's where we met, but we found out our stories were the same, and there was even a third organization, Women in Wisdom, out of Metro Detroit. So we have we weren't alone, but the three of us were the ones that convened women and went out into the community and did things together. So over the years, we still respond spontaneously, but after COVID, we largely went online, and that changed everything for us. We weren't community-based. Now we're doing online programs, and the biggie of all is producing the Women's Village at the Parliament of the World's Religions, because we happen to know that the world's religions was the original instigator of patriarchy, and in way too many cases, none of which I happen to know from those of you I know your faith traditions are not of this mindset, but are keepers of the patriarchy. And all of us also are. It's so pervasive. There's some things that I catch myself doing that come through the lens of a patriarchal view, because I'm a strong leader, or I like to take charge. I take a lot of air in the room. I'm learning how to be better in circle, but or even certain things I say, the things that I buy, the decisions I make. So you can really micromanage your patriarchy and see that we all kind of carry that. So it's good to start paying attention to your actions and your mood, your behaviors, and how we think, especially women who are so accustomed to belittling ourselves And we use the word just a lot, J-U-S-T, which, like the word but, that discounts the next thing that is said, just diminishes what we just said. So I'm going to invite everybody, women and men, to take the word just out of your vocabulary. That's how we practice. It's that simple to practice the awareness, is just with that one little trick. It's really interesting how it starts showing up in other ways. But it's my one thing I like to leave everybody is there's one little trick you can do to pay attention, becoming more aware. Pay attention to the words you use. Impeccability with our words is my biggest responsibility. And then I'm going to stop. I wanted to show you a little something about Sarah, and then we can get into this conversation. You've all heard the expression abracadabra. Abracadabra is derived from the word abracadabra. Forgive me if you speak Hebrew or Aramaic, but that abracadabra means I create with my words. Our words are magic. So we would be well served. I don't like to use the word should. We would be really well served to pay attention to the words we use, because they are energy manifested. So, that's another little something that helps me remember how powerful I am, how powerful we all are, because our words create magic, and I want to create good magic. So what kind of magic do you want to create? I'm going to show you, let me see how long this is. It's 59 seconds, and it's just a little high level look at Sarah. And it's things that we've done over the years. It's not entirely, this little thing always gets me. I've got to click on sound. This is a video of Sarah, largely over the years. You guys are going to see some people you know, I know it. Here we go. Can you hear that? Oh, you're not able to hear the sound? You're muted out. Oh, you could hear the sound.
I can hear the sound.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. Okay.
If you can make it just a little louder, that would help.
Oh, sure.
I'll make my sound louder too on my end, so I have it up to.
Okay, here we go. And by the way, this is us singing at one of our Sarah meetings.
Wendy, ho, 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 hey, ho, hey, ho, ya, ya, ya. Wendy, ho, Wendy, ho, Wendy, Wendy, ho, 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 hey, ho, ya, ya, ya. Wendy, ho, Wendy, ho, Wendy, Wendy, ho, 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 ho.
Oh, another video's going. Rookie mistake. Sorry about that. So those are largely our programs that we have done since we've gone online. And you can see that. Oh, yeah. Hi. But you can see that on our website at sarahforhope.org, and it doesn't even touch all the things that we've done. But I thought it was a short video to kind of give you a glimpse of some of our online programming, how we address a lot of the issues on the planet. And we have over the years, and all the recordings are there too. So now I would love, let's all have our voices heard. This is a conversation. We have about 40 minutes together. And what we're talking about now, Ariella, is our responsibility and privilege as women, that being that we are graced with not everyone who identifies as a woman, with our feminine, our divine feminine. So what does that mean to you to show up in that way? And or how are you doing that? And let's go popcorn style. And whoever wants to speak should speak. And I don't need to call on you. There'll just be uncomfortable silence until someone unmutes. Oh, here comes Ruthie.
You know, it was interesting growing up. The feminine side was something we didn't talk about. Right, Ruth?
Whatever you say, Steve, I'm with you.
There were things,
What am I saying yes to?
there were things that men and boys did and thought. And then there were things that girls and women thought. And never the twain shall meet. Because if you were doing something from the other sex, you were ridiculed, you were laughed at, you were whatever. And I'm guessing that it really wasn't until the late 60s that people began understanding that it is possible for a man to have traits that would otherwise be identified as feminine, and that it didn't mean they were less masculine. It just means that they had that ability. So I'm looking at two different things. One is ability, the feminine ability. I grew up, before the ministry, I was an architect. Well, that brings in design, and that brings in color, and that comes into how we work together and everything, which for some people that would be, oh, that's a woman's job. And so I think there's got to be maybe a better way to explain it, that I think as far as I know, for 75 years, I've been masculine. So I'm happy.
Well, this is what Rianne Eisler speaks largely about in her work on the Center for Partnership Studies and the domination trance, this pervasive condition of patriarchy that we don't know. We've just sort of been duped into it over the centuries. And that is that this is the way boys are, and this is the way girls are, and this is what girls are for, and this is what boys are for, and this is how we think. And it actually changes patterns in our thinking, in our brain, and eventually our chemistry. Yet, Carl Jung discovered or pretty much brought up the concept of anima and animus, which is the divine, the feminine and the masculine, and the masculine and the male, and the masculine and the. I happen to be very masculine in my traits. I'm strategic. I'm a planner. I'm organized. I'm certain responsibilities, different from feminine responsibilities. We're equally fierce, but I've already talked too much. So, but yeah, I really appreciate that. Hey, Ruth. Oh, go
Hi,
ahead.
I don't know what your opening statement, how did you get to this? What was the, where did you start from to get to this point?
Well, everyone heard a high-level understanding what Sarah is, and why this topic is so important, and why I wanted to have this conversation on our responsibility and privileges as women, and to alchemize the problem. So we'll get to the alchemizing part in a minute. But Abigail wanted to, and the question here, the question here is, what does it mean to you? So go ahead, Abigail.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting. It kind of piggybacking a little bit on Steve, we're of the elder generation. And so I remember as a young girl, my mother would say, You go where the man tells you to go. You know, if you're married, you go where he goes, you know, and you disregard your own wants and needs, you know. And so that was kind of inbred in me. And, you know, I married a man, my first husband, that was very patriarchal, because that was what I grew up with. And then after 20 years, it did not work for me anymore. So we left each other's company. And so I had some years that I had to figure out how to, you know, live my life on my own. I couldn't rely on anybody, and I had children to take care of. So I would say that for me, I gradually learned a lot of the patriarchal. I was always organized. I always, being a teacher, I was organized. My plans were good. I knew what I was doing in that classroom. I mean, down pat, right? And then over the years, becoming a minister, I had to learn to speak in front of people. I had to learn to work with people. I had to be more outgoing, whereas I was taught not to be. I never raised my hand in school, and yet, you know, so it was a gradual process for me to step into my own person, who I am, and incorporating the feminine when I plan things, incorporating the feminine in having to deal with people who aren't doing their jobs, and how do I deal with them? So I'm pretty, you know, this is what we need to do, and how are we going to get there? And I do it in a kind, I would say, feminine way, but it took a while to get there. And Steve and I always talk about personality styles, and I was always the quiet, analytical, amiable, and I learned how to be more direct, more driver, more expressive, because I had to. And so I think women incorporating their own divine feminine, I think this is the time, and I'm not saying they need to be patriarchal. I'm not going there, but they need to enlist that power within them, where they can stand up for themselves. They can stand up in a crowd. They can speak their word. They don't have to be silent. They don't have to be invisible. You know, if somebody says, well, what do you think about that? For years, when I was young, never said a word. And now you see I'm raising my hand. But it took a while. It was not innate in me. It took me a while to get to where I'm at today. So that's my stuff.
And that's and you just really nailed it when you said that you realized you had this opportunity to, or you found yourself in a place, and you saw the responsibility of taking care of it. And you being who you are as a woman, you have the privilege also to discover what that means for you. And
you know,
so
and I had to step out of a lot of comfort zones.
Yeah.
A lot of comfort zones to move forward, and which I did. And thank goodness I did.
Yeah.
So.
Responsibility will do that to you. And that's why I like to remember the responsibility part of that sentence, because it's like, well, it's my responsibility. I got to do it. I am here. I'm a woman. Of the indigenous prophecies all over the planet. It has been prophesized that the staff has been cast for the feminine. We got to get, and I just sent a newsletter out entitled "Get a Grip." We have to grip that staff.
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah. Hey, Ruthie.
Did everybody else speak already?
No.
Oh, no. I'll wait till.
Anyway.
Does anybody? I have something to say, but I'm happy to wait till. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the idea of strength and femininity through our religious and interreligious lens.
Well, we're going to do that. We might as well jump there. Yeah, that will get.
Because that's where I'm being led to. I'm thinking about, as we're talking about masculine and feminine traits and so forth. It's so fascinating to watch what's happening in the religions. You know, traditionally, only men could be rabbis in Judaism. I think they're the first rabbi was something like in 1870. It was a woman in Germany who actually was the first rabbi. And that particular evolution of how, and now today, I heard this marvelous story. A woman rabbi was speaking, and she said her son said to her once, "Mommy, can men be rabbis too?" Because all he had seen in his lifetime was a woman who was, and his mother's friends, colleagues who were also women rabbis, and so he was growing up with the thought that maybe not men couldn't be rabbis. So I remember when the first women's mosque was established in Los Angeles, and they met at the Pico Union Project, which was originally a synagogue, and then it was turned into a church, and then it was bought ultimately by Craig Taubman, who is a musician, composer, and an impresario, and he started renting out the synagogue to lots of different groups. It became an interfaith center, and the women's mosque, the first women's mosque, used to meet there, and I used to go to the meetings because I was so intrigued to see. It's one thing to hear about something, and it's another thing to be present while history is being made. So you could see how the women were assuming a mantle of leadership for themselves, and I think about some of the other traditions in Hinduism as well. There was always the idea of a man having a consort, but the woman had a lot of significance in that role. And you talked about indigenous. Where did Sandy go?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. You switched places on my screen. So
I noticed Abigail moved
culture that women were very revered, but it didn't always take that. I mean, it seems like it, even though the structure for women to have equal partnership might be there, society has changed that, even within the religion. So now, of course, the women, the grandmothers have a very special place around the world, and no matter what religion you're from, when you hear about them and you hear what they're doing and their prophecies, they have a cachet, and the fact that they're women makes them to seem, I don't know whether, Sandy, you have this feeling from working with them as well, but they have a prophetic quality to them.
Yeah.
That if a group of men, if you think of people, the men at Davos who are talking about the economics of the world and so forth, but if you think of the women, the Dalai Lama, His Holiness met with the women, the grandmothers, and he said that the people who will save the planet will be women. The Dalai Lama said that, and they'll probably be American women, he said.
Western.
He gave it that status.
Yeah,
Right.
I
think and then along comes the Barbie movie, which is a social phenomenon. I saw it with my daughter and a group of women, and there were many men in the audience.
Oh, don't give it away.
And so, pardon me?
Don't give away the end. I'm going tomorrow. So.
Oh, no, I won't.
No, their men are really loving it.
But I just want to say that it's an important movie. There are people who don't want to see it because, Barbie does it, but it's a very important movie because of what it says about our history here and how we've related to an artificial idea of who women are. But in the different faiths, one of the things that I've had to reckon with personally is that when I'm in the company of Orthodox men, I'm not allowed to sing. They don't want to hear a woman's voice because it could stir their desires, and then in Islam, it's very similar, some of the same restrictions that exist. And yet that's changing too. You see more and more women cantors who are appearing in mosques and who are singing Hebrew songs, and it's become okay. So I think that the religion, our idea of religion today has influenced these concepts, and also these concepts have influenced our religion. It's a mutual thing that's going on, that's changing, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating, but I don't think you can do this work in the world and not be aware of how women are held either in esteem or in disdain in places around the world. And that makes our work so much more interesting, because we're not equal other places we go. And Reverend Dr. Gwen Ward, the late and wonderful, she worked in interfaith in Syria with men in discussion at the table, where at one point she prevented the men from getting up and walking out because women were there. She was able to talk to him in such a way that he stayed at the meeting. So, but this doesn't happen across the board. In every place it's different, and we have to shift ourselves, right, and what we know about, and how even what we're going to say based on the current culture of where it's happening, right?
So I want to put a pin in what you're saying. Forgive me for interrupting you, because I want to.
No, that's fine.
I want to stay on topic, because what we're talking about, I mean, you're going all around. I know you missed the beginning. That what we want to, what I really like to focus on is moving forward, what our responsibility and privileges are. These are models, these are examples, these are indicators that we are in a historic time. We are, like Ruth said, we're seeing evidence of it in our faith traditions. It's a slow drip, but we are. We're considering what's happening at the Parliament with the Women's Village, a historic moment. We are stepping, that would be my answer to what I'm doing right now in terms of my responsibility and my privilege. 1,300 square feet, and a circle of women are claiming that this is an example of the way women show up in the world, in the midst, and forgive me for saying it this way, but in the face of the world's religions, who have largely been the perpetuators of systems of domination. And I feel, and studies support this theory. I should say I agree with the studies that, rather than it being me, because I know how that sounded, that you know, we know that religions get right to our heart. That's why religions can be considered so manipulative too, is because it's, you know, they get right to your heart, and that's a hard thing to change and rewire. So I would like to ask others about what you see as your and all right, we've gotten there a little bit faster. I was going to ask you what your responsibility is. My next question was going to be, what is your through the lens of how you practice your faith tradition, or what you subscribe to, or secular ethic, however you identify, what is that? What is the mechanism that reminds you to show up in that integrity that Ruth was talking about? Using our voice, using our actions, paying attention to what we're doing, taking leaps into territories that are uncomfortable, but we know they have to happen. How does your faith inspire you in that direction? That was a long question.
Yeah, I kind of like to go back to the meat of the first question.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Oh yeah, this is a circle.
So, you know, what does it mean to show up in the divine feminine with our responsibility and privilege? And it really is your perspective of like if I was to show up with it's where the mindset and where the focus is. So if I want to be in a world of the divine feminine, what I think of the divine feminine, I think of a naturally integrated spirit and nature and that nature is like so integrative, the web of life, like one species depends on another species, males depend on females, females depend on males. We all people depend on each other to survive. So in my privilege and my responsibility, if I were to show up in a patriarchal forum, let's say a political meeting, or even a traditional religious encounter, I would say that my responsibility is to remain in this space of connection rather than saying, oh, I don't agree with you, I don't like you, like putting these barriers between us, which is what the major religions kind of do, and say, you're wrong, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm right. So it's like letting go of that whole kind of mindset of hierarchy, competition, who's better, who's right, and saying, this religion honors their God in this way, but the God that they worship and our God, there's really, if you really study each religion, they go right to one God and the source, and then the body, it's I can't separate my body from my divinity anymore. And I think that's also gets reflected on how I treat the earth and my resources. And I can't think of throwing away something after one use. I mean, that's my responsibility to not keep taking from the earth and throwing it away to the garbage dump where it's not going to plastic does not go away ever. So, that's a lot of responsibility. And the privilege is that, I do have a privilege that I don't have a lot of, I'm not a famously rich person, but I choose whatever money and dimes and nickels and dollars I have to buy the least manipulated food, the least amount of plastic, just by my financial decisions, being able to afford a hybrid car to spend less gas, use less gas. So I respect that I have lots of privileges to be able to do less damage to the earth, which is part of the creator to me. And that's my faith tradition. So
yeah, that's beautiful. I just have to pause and say, Carol, I'm so glad that you turned your camera on because you are stunning. Look at your hat. And I can't not say, you're all beautiful people. Look at this. You're muted. You're muted, Carol. We can't hear you. Can you unmute?
I have been listening since about 6:10, but was not having my camera on because I've been feeding the dog and so forth, but I've been listening, and it's very interesting conversation, and it's wonderful that you have your Zooming podcasts and speak so well and have what you're doing. So thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm here because of Ruth Boyd Sharon, so it's great that she's signed in tonight too.
Yeah, and you're welcome to contribute. I mean, if you'd like to share anything, I love what Sushila just said. Maybe we can, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sushila, I just want to acknowledge something that you said. Well, everything that you said. I too, my responsibility starts before I buy the product. So it begins in my consumerism. Women make up 86% of all the buying decisions in the home. Women, there was a study about 10 or 15 years ago that if all the women in United States, I believe it was, there might have been a smaller area, stopped shopping at Walmart for one day, it would shut down Walmart. Walmart couldn't survive one day without that revenue in this country. So look how powerful we are in the decisions we make and the repercussions of it, because it shows up in our healthcare. It shows up in our environment. It shows up. There is nothing. It's another thing you said. We're all belong to one another, and so do our decisions have that impact. So homelessness and healthcare and, cradle to prison pipeline, and we can go on and on. Everything is systemic and all comes from the same root ball of our behavior and our choices. And that we make our choices from our heart center, and that's where religion lives. So that's why I love this conversation. Yeah, thank you. And I was at Kinko's today, and somebody couldn't find something, and I in my mind I'm thinking, you are my beloved, and you are my beloved, and my beloved is mine. That saying, came into my mind about the stranger who was looking for something. And I said, I probably have it in my purse if you're looking for it. I didn't have tape in my purse, but anyway, so the more we do this stuff, the more it just becomes, oh, we're starting to see everyone as our beloveds too. I love that. Yeah. Carol or Ariella or Vanessa?
Oh, yeah, well,
Or
I'm just listening and absorbing. As a woman, as a human being, I just try to always remember I am a reflection of God and all the amazing aspects of kindness and principle and understanding and love and healing and spirituality and growth and humor. They're all a part of me, and I just need to keep uncovering it and expressing it and share that with others and listen to what they have found and just keep learning. I love being with this group because it's such wonderful expressions each of these days. And of course, that's what brought Ruth and me together some years ago. And then she introduced me to Interfaith. I got to come to some meetings. And I have my own salon on the spiritually creative life that I launched 27 years ago, but it was just something natural because it was a part of what I'd always been trying to do with my writing and my work, is try to always be conscious that it was expressing God in some way. And I like to have that consciousness and concentrate on it. And so but as far, I just think of the amazing men's strength and the woman's lovingness and caring, but they're all work together and blend together. So I don't have much that I feel like trying to analyze in that. Although I wish I could be at your women's village at the conference. I won't be there, but at any rate, that's sort of who I am, and I'm just listening. And I've so enjoyed hearing at each of the programs, Reverend Albert, Abigail Albert, and Reverend Dr. Dave Albert.
Stephen.
Such a fabulous week.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Personal responsibility and personal agency is what we have. That's what we have. There's nobody coming to save us. It's up to us. Thich Nhat Hanh said the next guru is community.
Well, kindness is one of those major aspects of God. And one thing that I do concentrate on is loving with discernment. I've really had to learn how important that is. And then I read that the great teachers, including Jesus, I'm Christian, but the thing that drives me to Interfaith is that I always have been interested in the truth in everyone, in all thought paths and journeys, but loving with discernment. That doesn't mean cutting down on the amount of love, for everything, but to be wise as one can be, so that one makes good decisions, hopefully, in what one does or buys or treats the earth, and what we're doing on this part of our eternal life, on this beautiful planet now.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I was going to say, but the men, for instance, I have two cousins. I don't think we've ever met, although I've always known about them. But they write almost every day, and they're mostly quoting the Bible. They have big families, and they're teachers. One's a teacher and one's a lawyer. I don't know how they have time to write so much every day. But one sent me something today, and I haven't printed it out yet, and it's too long. But it goes through, just as you were saying. It goes to this man. I think he's a man. It could have been a woman. Well, he was talking about himself. I woke up today, except that he didn't write this. I think he quoted it from someone else. Woke up today and said, who are you, God? And God goes through this list of loving and strong, and it's such an amazing list. It's quite long on my computer that I haven't printed out yet. Goes through all these things, and all powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, everything. Thank you, God. But who am I? You are mine, is the answer. And I just loved it. I thought that was wonderful.
It's a great punchline.
Isn't that?
Yeah, yeah, that's really beautiful. So, and again, your lens in the world, I think we're all here to bring the light, and you bring the light. And that's also our responsibility and our privilege. We all have the light to contribute. And so how do we do that? How do we show up in that light? Yeah. So
I'm really glad you're celebrating women. I just think that's great. I just thought it's wonderful. Wonderful to be celebrating women.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to just say something about equality. I don't believe it was you who mentioned the word equality, but women have been struggling for equality, but really what it was parity, equal access, right? Because I don't want to do what a man can do, and a man can't do what I can do. I'd like to see a man have a womb and grow, give birth. And so to identify something Sushila said also, how we see the other, and you don't just put them in a box. I'm just completely through what I heard. You're not going to look at someone and go, well, that's the way they are, and I don't need to have anything to do with them. It's like to honor them for who they are and what they bring. And I want to be honored and for what I bring. And women have been looking for that parity. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. I don't think anybody expected that. Oh, so
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'll be right back.
I think some in Boston.
Sorry, darling.
Yet women, and this is really important to understand. Remember, we all understand it. We were the medicine women. We are closer to Earth, so we're more likely to relate with nature to create medicine. And there's a wonderful documentary. I don't know if it's wonderful, a really important documentary that Starhawk was a co-producer of, called The Burning Times. And back in the 14th and 15th century, patriarchy really got its grip during the Spanish Inquisition, women who were medicine women were seen as so powerful, and yet too powerful. So what happened over time? We became criminals. What happened? We were villainized. What happened? We were burned at the stake for being witches. And so the power that women have, I think we're coming, I believe, I know, and I feel in my heart that we are coming back into that power relationship. We're remembering who we are. We're remembering that we are the keepers of water. Our wombs are the first ocean, whether you've given birth or not. You know, we heal, we sustain, we protect, we preserve, and we also create with our bodies. And men do other things that are really important. The male body does other things that are very important. So yeah, women coming into the power, it's not so much about men clearing the way for us, it's for us to remember who we are. And for us to pull our shoulders back and our chin up. And, you know, I'm here and I have a responsibility as a woman in the world to step into that, step through that courage. And this is where I wanted to get to alchemy. So alchemy has been a really important word in my life for many years. And it's actually in the title of my book, and about alchemizing opportunity and spaces to ultimately realize our authentic soul. Our soul. Oh, boy.
No. It's a boy.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Oh
Carol.
God, stop. Stop.
Wow.
Stop it.
So I'm looking at your video, your note here. Thank you. Well, do you want to, I'm just kind of running off here in a long sentence here. Abigail, did you want to read this? About, you're muted.
Yes, there was a woman program today at 8 o'clock in the morning. Two wonderful Episcopalian women priests, and the stories they shared about going through trying to become an Episcopal priest that now women are allowed, quote unquote, allowed to become. And then Dr. Jane Vaya, who came down with COVID. So I took her part and I wrote about her in my book, Empowered Women of Faith. So I was able to scroll through some of the things. And just some of the stories that they shared about how they kept persevering to follow their heart in spite of the patriarchal system in their faith traditions to become priests in their tradition. Because what I didn't realize is Episcopalian are really Catholics, but they have a different take on it. There's a little more, but they consider themselves Catholic, believe it or not. And anyway, we'll have a YouTube up, and I can't go through the whole thing because it would take up way too much time. But the one Episcopal priest said that when she was going through her training and internship, they said, you know what, and her husband was going through it too. They said, you need to stop doing this so he can get his priesthood, basically, in the Episcopal Church, because if you do it with them, they will deny him priesthood because you shouldn't be doing it. So she had to hold back for a number of years to let him get through the whole process of training. He got his, so he was ordained, done deal. Then she could pursue her passion. You know, things like that. And of course, the Roman Catholic priest, Jane Vaya, is excommunicated. However, there are like hundreds of women Catholic priests now that have been ordained by by men originally, and then they passed that down through the different women. And they're running and they're going. And regardless of being excommunicated, they are holding service, and I applaud them for their perseverance in the midst of all the patriarchy in the Catholic Church. So I think that really in time, like the Episcopalians, we will see there will come a time when women will be priests in the Catholic Church. There will come a time when we really do have that place where we really should be anyway. And unfortunately, it's a process. I have to say for myself, I've been very fortunate in the New Thought tradition. there are more women ministers than there are men. You know, it's gender equal basically, and a very inclusive community. So I've been very fortunate. I didn't have to go through, you know, breaking through the glass ceiling kind of thing. I wanted to do it and I did it, and end of report. So anyway, there's just, we just have to keep pushing through. That's all.
Oh, Vanessa's got her hand raised, and I want to make sure we come back to something you said about courage. Vanessa.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Buenas tardes. I just wanted to, first of all, compliment you, Sandy, when you first were beginning and opening, talking about people that honor feminine and not necessarily identify as women. And so I think as a white cisgendered woman talking about privilege and our responsibilities, I believe it's very important to recognize kind of a non-binary spirit or sense of femininity and the goddess of divinity, and to sort of hold that open space for everyone that wants to come into that. And also as a white woman, despite the patriarchy, I still have a lot of privileges, you know, due to the color of my skin. And I think one of my responsibilities that I take very seriously is holding up women of color, people of color, you know, various different voices that also need to be heard besides, you know, white women's voices, or in addition to all of our voices. And so I just wanted to mention that as I was thinking about my responsibility and privilege. So thank you.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to hear your voice. I'm so glad that you brought this up, because this is another indicator that we are in a historic time, that all that which does not serve us is falling away. And if it feels like it's not, or it feels like, yes, but look at the political climate in this country. Look at the fires in the raging waters, and the you know, the climate and deforestation, and look at all these conditions that are happening all around us right now. It's another indicator. And those forces, particularly those that are in the realm of the political field, and are resisting the change. The Indigenous elders that I've had the blessing of being in circle with, I've learned from them that you know, when anything is dying, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be biting. There's going to be kicking. There's going to be fighting and screaming and resistance, and what we can do. And that's just a resistance. And I've become so comfortable in that resistance where I can honestly not be triggered by it anymore, like I was a couple of years ago. I can honestly go, oh, that's a resistance. That's a good sign. And because our nervous system has taken a hit so dramatically through COVID, and even if you weren't, if you enjoyed the seclusion and you've said your prayers over all the suffering, nobody is immune from the anxiety and the depression and the tensions that are in the world because of what Sushila said, because we are all connected. We all belong to one another. So the responsibility to be able to acknowledge, pay attention to our language. I'm learning my pronouns. Sushila.
Yeah, so I think it works the other way too, and that's the alchemy that's beautiful, is that if we individually can calm our nervous systems, and that's what I've been working on the last 10 years with the female success model of oxytocin, and really just letting it go into the earth, like all the anxiety and the grief. Like, we have to let the emotions out. We can't just, oh, I'm watching the world burn, but I can't feel anything. No, you have to feel it, but you have to let it go through. And then you have to, if you hang on to it, we're not going to be able to function. But if we feel it and let it go, and then that, every time we calm down, somebody else can calm down. And right now, like I said, everybody's kind of, I think our nervous systems from all these different angles have really amped up people's adrenaline and nervous breakdowns. So the opposite is true, that by doing our practice, our religious practice, or whatever practice, you're calming your body, being in silence, not getting into the arguing. That's alchemy.
And that's a privilege we have. We all have the ability to go there. I've spent the last couple of years writing and thinking and talking a lot about liminality, liminal space, the space, and stretching those moments between crisis and action, decision and, you know, and choice, you know, crisis and reaction or response. And when you stretch out that space, there's room to alchemize how you see it and what you're going to do next. It's, I think, the most important thing that we can do right now for one another and for ourselves. I learned from a very dear friend of mine, Andrew Cameron Bailey, the concept of enlightened self-interest. That which I do for you, I do for myself. And what I do for myself, I do for you. And if I try to practice, everything that I do is good for me. But then the next question, is it good for humanity or good for the planet or good for that person, whatever the situation is? And it's, you just have to retrain your thoughts through neuroplasticity. Whatever you can do to remember that moment, because you can remember that moment till it becomes a habit. And now it's a habit. And it starts showing up in different ways. And then the world changes. You've heard change your thoughts, change the world. That's alchemy. That's what alchemy can. Yeah, go ahead.
That stretching, or the slowing down. Like we've been on a rat wheel for 5,000 years, just, you know, trying to run to get ahead, to do this and do that. With COVID, we kind of slowed down, and I mean, at least I was slowed down to you know, to just sitting here, and I think it did change. I think it had the possibility to open people to slowing down. And then as soon as COVID was over, everybody's back rushing again. It's like, I don't want to go there. I'm going to take my time, and I've let go a lot in the last month or so, and mostly due to having a new grandbaby. But you know, that's where I want to spend, just being there present for this one child who's the future. He's a future, and he'll affect many people if he gets the love and attention and support he needs by just holding him. And I just love it.
Isn't it nice to know that we can have that impact on someone? And we also can have, he will make an impact on people without a doubt. The question is what impact? What's the impact, right? Because I think no one's immune from my energy. I want to keep it good. And my energy is usually through the roof. And that helps me bring it down personally. I can only speak for myself. Yeah, so that's enlightened self-interest too. It's good for himself, good for others. Yeah. Ariella, would you like to share? Yeah.
I would. This is, there's been so much.
Yeah.
What people have been saying have been bringing up some.
Your volume isn't really good. Can you maybe try coming closer to your microphone? Maybe that'll help.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Growing up, when I was little, in a town in Zambia, Central Africa, which was then Northern Rhodesia, there was a very small Jewish community. and we could only have services if there were 10 male adults. And so we couldn't have services unless people from out of town, relatives from out of town came, because there weren't 10 male adults. And then when I visited South Africa and went to big services, then the women were upstairs and the men were downstairs. So I was very aware of that patriarchal distinction. Then when I came to the United States, I saw that there was much less of that, and that was really encouraging to me. But I still, before I go into that, I did have a negative woman's experience. When in high school, my father was in Zambia, and the mining company paid for me to go to a women's boarding school, a girls' boarding school. And, I thought it would be loving and supportive, but you had to say, if the teachers said anything, you had to say, "Yes, madam." And I had been at school in North America for 3 years, and I would say, "Okay, madam," and they would scream at me for not saying "yes, madam." And I wrote to my parents and said how upset I was after 3 people screamed at me in a row. And then they wrote to the principal, and she called me in. And I thought she was going to help me, how to solve this issue or cope with it. And she said, "Don't you dare write another letter like that home to your parents." And I thought, I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought, if this is what teachers are like in this part of the world, I can't be a teacher. And it was actually a blessing, because I became a speech therapist. But so I had that negative experience in a women's community. But I still, as becoming an adult, stayed in women's communities. I developed a Rosh Chodesh group celebrating the new moon, which was with women once a month. And I volunteered for 15 years at a women's prison. And so I did stay within women's groups a lot. But within my connection with the divine, I came in Judaism, it's father and king and all the masculinity, but I came to the point of seeing my divine source as not masculine or feminine, not gendered, but as the divine source of all that is both feminine and masculine. And so that's been my experience with that. And there's something else that's not coming to mind that I wanted to say, but I must say, when 2020 arrived, and we would, it was the having 2020 vision. I thought that that the world was going to see things as I saw them. By the time I was 14, I had decided this whole thing about borders and passports, we've made it all up. We're one human family living on one world. And when you see the photographs from space, you can see there are no lines. And we've just made it all up. And so when it was 2020 and we'd all get 2020 vision, and see that we were all one human family. And I didn't know how that was going to happen. I mean, it was wonderful that understanding, but and then the pandemic came and things were shifting so much that I thought, well, this is part of how things are going to change. And that there has been a big change. And hopefully I've actually been seeing the trouble that's going on in the world as the labor pains of rebirth. But it's also interesting that somebody suggested that it's also seeing the resistance of the dying, of what's dying, to get to the rebirth and the labor pains that's happening in our world. So those are the things that have been coming up for me while I've been listening to everything people have been saying. Oh, everything's frozen.
Thank you. I've muted myself. I wanted to say, to your point, I've spent the last 22 years specifically surrounding myself with women. And so I can say firsthand, there's no shortage of women who, and I said earlier, including myself on times, and that's my goal, that's when I'll get to cronehood, when I master this, that are extremely patriarchal and practice systems of domination too. So women are not, you're right, it's not gender-based. That patriarchy is not gender-based, and to Vanessa's point. It is, and it's time to ask a different question, I think. It's time to reframe how we look at each other and how we see things, as not how, putting, the totality of somebody's actions doesn't make up what their soul's purpose is and who they are. Everything else that we walk around in, this earth suit, it's all impermanent. Everything will fall away, but the soul is the only unchanging thing. Our personality changes, our cells regenerate, our blood regenerates, food goes in and out, things happen in our body that's constantly regenerating. Our thoughts change, our face changes, our bodies change. The only thing that's permanent, the only thing that we know for sure is our soul. And I believe that when we start asking these questions and we start pulling away the layers of the things that don't serve us, questioning assumptions about how we see one another, thinking through the lens of the highest ideals of our faith traditions, when we look at another, seeing the other as our beloved, is how we start to alchemize our behavior and therefore the impact on our planet and all of the crisis in the world. Before I ask Ruth a question, because I kind of stopped Ruth and she just disappeared, I wanted to see if Manik, if there was anything you wanted to add, so all voices are heard who want to be heard.
I was just thinking that, we have certain things endowed by nature that give certain kind of privileges, right? Like the woman is the one who has the privilege of bearing a child, right? And nurturing the child. And then, of course, responsibilities, we all have uh, certain responsibilities, and of course, these have changed over time uh, based on culture, right? Religion also has played some part. Like if you look at the Genesis or something, that the man is the one who God created first, and then the woman is created from the rib of Adam or something like that, right? So kind of woman has been, in some religions, women have been uh, portrayed as, somewhat subservient or second class type of thing. Even in Islam, in the Quran, what I have a translation of the Quran by Egyptian scholar, and there I've read that the woman is supposed to be obedient to the husband, the wife has to be obedient to the husband, and if she does not obey, uh, he can even beat her, that kind of thing, right? So some religious scriptures have these kind of things that have influenced, how people have created their impressions or understanding of how society should be. And then you have the orthodox people who want to blindly follow, what has been done in the past. Okay, they don't want to think that okay, society has changed. In the past, women were not even allowed to study. My mother wasn't allowed to study more than the fourth grade, and she had to be pulled out of school, and my grandmother had to have a private tutor, to teach her things and all that kind of thing. But then nowadays, women go to college, women work in all professions, at least in some of our countries, right? India has that. Um, and and the Western countries, allow women to be, whatever occupation they want to do. Of course, the man again has certain, nature has given man certain larger muscular, type of property. And so they have been usually accustomed to be given the responsibility of defending the country, right? If you look in history, the men have been usually the large part, and then over time we had the man become the breadwinner, So then again he gets a certain higher status, um, by definition because of that, Uh, so, and these things change, right? When you are in the farming occupation, both men and women would go to the farm, to sow the seeds and harvesting and all that kind of thing. But in our like urban jobs, usually, and then of course there was the thing that you needed someone to take care of the children, smaller children, and the mother was kind of had the privilege again because she had that nurturing quality more than the man. Um, and so she was given, delegated the task of staying home, taking care of the home, whereas the man went out and earned the money, kind of thing. So some of these things are fluid, uh, and some people don't want to change. They don't want to adapt, in the matter of priesthood, in our religion, Zoroastrian religion, we had the hierarchical system, that only the children of a priest family could become a priest. Okay. So nowadays, when there was we noticed a shortage of the regular priests because they don't earn a lot of money. They rather be doctors, engineers, whatever, businessmen. So, so now we try to become a priest from the non-hierarchical group, and there was a lot of resistance, from the regular priests because they saw it as a competition to their income, type of thing. Even though there's a shortage, practicing priests, all that. So, so these are things, it's a complex thing a little bit, and these are things that change, and we have to learn to adapt to change and accept, the different uh, divisions of responsibility. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Manik. Accepting is I mean, that's so powerful right there, what you just said. And I'm glad you're back, Ruth, because I would love for you to help wrap this up. The word acceptance, that's part of the resistance when we don't accept. No, things have always been this way. And I feel something, when we start paying really close attention to our body, miracles happen. Our body is our GPS system. Our body has got built-in indicators. It's wired to let us know when things aren't working out. When we start paying attention to the knot in our throat, or that overall feeling, or this just doesn't feel right. I'm not going to do that. Rather than my thinking, well, logically it makes sense. When we start relying more on our body wisdom than external influences that aren't ours, but are making someone else rich or happy or wealthy, but yet we're taking the hit. We don't have to accept that anymore. We can question that assumption. So I'm so glad you ended everything you just said with that word, because it's time to not accept things that don't serve us, as well as accepting where we're moving into, and remember our power in it, and that our power resides in our highest integrity of being who we are. Ruth, you started the conversation, and I want to make sure if there was anything else you wanted to say at the end of the call coming, because you're muted. And by the way, you're in Chicago, right? You're muted still.
Yes, I'm in Chicago, so it's 2 hours later here.
Oh, okay.
So I had thoughts about what's happening with gender liquidity now, what's going on, that there's something happening in our society which is pointing to the fact that all the labels that we have for masculine and feminine and all that are being questioned, and it's causing a huge disruption for people, and with the idea that now we need another 200 pronouns because otherwise we can't talk to each other. It's very I have to say, I feel I'm an open-minded person, and I'm progressive in my thinking, but there's some things that have come into question now which are very troubling, and I think that is as a result of what you talked about, that when an old system is crumbling, that the discomfort and the fact that I still think that having gender identity, the classic gender identity, is not necessarily a bad thing. But what I'm looking at is why so many people feel that we should not have classifications which help us to discern in the world different things. I mean, it's that one of the first things that people notice about each other when they meet each other is their gender, and that can have many aspects to it. But to ask us not to recognize any gender at all is a huge stretch, but maybe it's pointing to something else that's more important than even the gender issue. So that's when you talk about alchemy. For me, alchemy is taking lead and finding a way to transform it into gold. That was the classic idea of the alchemists. That's what they did. They felt there was a way to do that. And if we apply that symbolically to our society, it's taking what's heavy and unmovable and transforming it through the work that we do. So our work then becomes the chemicals that the alchemists used to transform the lead into gold. So we're in, I don't think we've ever been able to see ourselves so much in process and in transformation as we do now. The labor pains that go with it, or whatever you want to call those, the resistance, the kicking and screaming that we see, is all apart because we're tearing down systems that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And that's really that challenge. And they're all happening at the same time, because people are also being asked to extend their idea of what is it to be a godly person. Of people that have believed that there's only one way to approach and to understand and to accept and to know God. That there are still people, many people like that in the world, who will judge us if we don't accept their way. And so in the interfaith community, we've been exposed to the stretches more so than mainstream people in society. So maybe we have the capacity to appreciate what's happening to the world, and we have the antenna that we've developed, especially being exposed to wisdom of indigenous people. I remember when indigenous people were only invited to do ceremony, and we didn't have any people in our interfaith communities that were actually active in the group, except we would call them in every time we'd have an event. We would comment on the ground we were standing on, who it originally belonged to. We would ask them to do this ceremony, the 4 directions, right? And then that would be their role would end. And now we see at the parliament major figures from the indigenous community who are keynote speakers and who people sit at their feet to learn from them. That has changed in my lifetime. I see the difference between how we first approached our indigenous brothers and sisters and now what we're doing. So I'm just grateful for the fact that this is a training ground for us. And what you're talking about, Sandy, this is a training ground. It's also a training ground for women. Azam Karam, who is now the head of Religions for Peace, and Audrey Kitagawa was a few years ago. She's no longer with the parliament, but she was the first woman to be elected president of the board of trustees. That was a historical thing too. So everything is changing around us, and we're witnessing it, and we're also watching people's discomfort. So maybe we need to be midwives to discomfort. Maybe that's what
I want to have that.
To do.
That's a whole nother call, because that's where alchemy is. Our culture does not do discomfort very well. When we start seeing discomfort as our ally, as our friend, as our blessing, as our opportunity, and get over our discomfort and say, oh, this is a gift, just like the resistance. But I have to stop myself. I'm going to interrupt myself because it's 7:32, at least here in California. Steve and Abigail have been up since 3:30 a.m. This is the final program of their week.
Tomorrow. There's a program tomorrow.
I mean, for today, right? There's a program tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I want to just say personally, at least because we're almost to the end of your week, God bless you. Goddess bless you. Spirit bless you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for stepping into your power and your responsibility and the privilege that you have with your community to make Interfaith Awareness Week more than possible, to make it thrive, and for holding that vision for so long. I'm just so personally grateful for you. I love you both dearly. And
Amen.
Amen. And let's have another conversation. Well, maybe Ruth, you and I should have a webinar on, getting a grip on
All right. The value of discomfort.
The joy of discomfort, something like that.
The joy of discomfort, right.
All right, love you all.
Okay, that's a good title.
Thank you all for your contribution.
Bye, Carol, honey.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for contributing.
Bye, Matt.
Good night. Thank you.
Very special.
Bye.
Bye, Sandy. Take good care of yourself.
Oh yeah, I'll see you in a few days. Bye.
I know, but take good care of yourself.
And Ruth, see you at the parliament.
The parliament, right? I wish you could come, Carol. You would absolutely adore it.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Safe travels.
Bye bye.